Defiant Zimbabwean lawyers march to demand a return to the rule of law amid a brutal security crackdown. A Ghanaian school implements a unique physical education program. And a Cameroonian designer's fresh take on African fashion. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui. You're in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Hundreds of Zimbabwean lawyers are on the offensive Tuesday, marching to demand justice for people detained in jail and others facing trials after violent protests this month led to mass arrests and a brutal security crackdown. Police say more than 1,000 people have been arrested since January 14th, when a 3-day stay-at-home strike was called after President Emmerson Mnangagwa's massive fuel price hike led to street violence and looting. Those charged have been denied bail in a pattern lawyers say is a violation of their rights. Pressure group Zimbabwe Lawyer for Human Rights says the arrests and detentions, most for public order offenses, have exceeded the legal system's capacity. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe's leading opposition politician Nelson Chamisa tells reporters that President Mnangagwa is responsible for the brutal protests and the anarchy seen in the country.
The person we hold responsible for the anarchy we saw in the country is none other than Mr. Mnangagwa, who announced a 150% increase in fuel prices without any due notice, without any justification. He's the one who instigated citizen response. It has nothing to do with the embassy. I don't know how many women are supposed to be raped before we begin to see the intervention of our regional bodies.
The President Mnangagwa said he had ordered the arrest of a soldier and a police officer filmed assaulting a man in handcuffs. Zimbabwe has no shortage of educated young people with college degrees, but the majority of them are unemployed. Could entrepreneurship and innovation be the ultimate answer to solving this serious problem? Africa 54's Paul Ndiho tells us more.
The Zimbabwean economy has been in a slump for more than a decade, with cash shortages and high unemployment. Now demonstrators are clashing with government security forces in Harare. The protesters are angry over the massive rise in fuel prices ordered by the government. Boost Fellowship, a non-profit youth-based organization, is trying to reverse the economic downturn. Busisiwe Malandri is the executive director at Boost Fellowship.
We look at ourselves as a bridge between the opportunities that young people seek for and the opportunities that are out there.
The fellowship works in conjunction with Enactus, a global learning platform that operates in 36 countries and strives to develop the next generation of entrepreneurs.
It requires commitment because the young people who are part of the Enactus program have to do projects while they are in school. These projects are entrepreneurial in nature. They must be environmentally sustainable. They must be economically viable. And they must cause social change.
Many people are turning to entrepreneurship and innovation to make a living during the economic slowdown.
Entrepreneurship is huge in Zimbabwe, especially for youth, because there's currently an issue with unemployment, where there are more young people graduating and coming out of university than the jobs that are available on the market.
Created in 2000, the Enactus Fellowship has trained over 2,000 young people between the ages of 20 and 25 in work readiness skills. Over 300 participants have secured internship opportunities, which resulted in full-time employment. Brian Melimi is an apprentice at Boost Fellowship.
So Boost is all about building opportunities for students. And from Boost, you can learn to be confident, you can learn how to manage projects, how to get yourself into projects, how to network, how to meet the big people, and I can say how to eat when you're in a hotel. So you do learn a lot of things from Boost Enactus.
Alvin Tapera is a university student who hopes to start a business one day.
As young students, we are coming from universities. We need to run the big companies. We need to drive our economies. basically in Africa, we are lagging behind, like the Western countries and the Eastern countries. So as the youth, we want to further push the economy of Africa and also bring our countries in Africa to be one of the competitive economies in the whole world.
The program is working with universities in Zimbabwe, and they have created 5 power teams that go into communities to implement waste management models.
So we are trying to work with youth and making them see that you can actually earn a livelihood from waste. So we have 5 power teams that are running entrepreneurial initiatives in Zimbabwe. So they are earning from what we normally see as waste. And they've also developed a mobile application that is into waste collection. So once you have waste in your community, you can simply contact them via the mobile application. They come and collect, and at zero cost, they make goods that they can sell.
When President Emmerson Mnangagwa took over from Robert Mugabe, he pledged to revive the failing economy, end the country's international isolation, and restore the badly needed confidence in the country. But critics say that he has failed to turn the economy around and instead triggered angry protests. Paul Liho, VOA News, Washington.
2 people were killed and 5 wounded on Tuesday when a car packed with explosives was detonated near the Ministry of Petroleum in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. A regional security official says the vehicle was parked at a petrol station in front of the ministry's offices when the device was triggered. The official told a press conference that 2 civilians were confirmed dead, while 5 others were wounded in the blast. A witness says one of those killed was a woman who was selling tea. No group has claimed responsibility, but Al-Shabaab terrorists have been seeking to topple the internationally backed Somali government and has often carried out attacks in Mogadishu. The Al-Qaeda-affiliated group has lost many of its strongholds, but retains control of large rural parts of the country. A lawyer for Cameroonian opposition leader Maurice Kamto says authorities arrested Kamto on Monday following weekend protests that security forces dispersed with live bullets, wounding 6 people. Kamto has been mobilizing dissent against President Paul Biya since losing what he says was a fraudulent election in October. Kamto declared himself the winner at the time of the poll and has since challenged Biya's win in the African Union Court. Protests are rare in Cameroon outside its troubled Anglophone Western region and tend to be swiftly put down by force and mass arrests. Kamto's lawyer, Agbo Bala, told reporters that his client was arrested because of the weekend protests in which dozens took part. Kamto lost his presidential bid to Biya. At 85, Biya is the oldest leader in sub-Saharan Africa, and most Cameroonians have never known any other president. The UN Refugee Agency said Tuesday that some 30,000 people fled the Nigerian city of Ran into Cameroon over the weekend, fearing an attack by Boko Haram. The UNHCR spokesman Baba Baloch told a UN briefing in Geneva that the exodus followed the departure of Cameroonian forces who had moved to secure the city following an attack by Boko Haram on January 14th. Refugees reported that Boko Haram previously promised to return to the city, which originally had an estimated population of about 80,000. Immediately after the January 14th attack, 9,000 people fled into Cameroon, but they were denied asylum and returned to Nigeria by Cameroonian authorities. It is not clear how many people were left in Ran. The mass migration flows that followed the 2011 Arab Spring in North Africa and the Middle East were partly caused by climate change, according to new research. Scientists from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Austria say that in certain circumstances, climate conditions can lead to conflict, which drives increased migration. Here's Henry Ridgwell.
As the Arab Spring uprisings took hold across the Middle East and North Africa in 2010, millions of people fled their homes to find new lives in the years that followed. Researchers claim to have identified evidence of a causal link between those conflicts and changes to the climate across the region and the ensuing migration flows. The report authors say the roots of the Syrian conflict can be found in preceding droughts and water shortages.
people started not being able to produce agricultural production, and that was the start of migration from the rural area to urban area, which was already quite crowded. And the resources in the urban area was also scarce. So when there was a kind of tension of fighting for limited resource, and on top is the ethnic polarization in Syria. So it's sort of all that combination.
The researchers used data on asylum applications and conflict-related deaths. They combined this into a mathematical model with data on drought and rainfall, plus other variables such as population size and measures of democracy and ethnic diversity.
So let's look how climate increases the probability of conflict. And once we estimate that, we use the number that we got from that to estimate the next step. So the country that experience conflict from climate variation, are they likely to send out the refugee flows or not?
The researchers emphasize that climate change will not cause conflict and subsequent asylum-seeking flows in every instance.
The effect of climate on migration through conflict is quite specific to certain time period and to certain countries. So climate-induced conflict is a bit more likely in the country with the medium level of democracy.
The results of this study are specific to the Western Asia region and the time period in question. But it's hoped the research will contribute to the global debate on how migration flows will be affected by increasingly severe climate change. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Venezuela is marred in debt. The economy is in free fall. Its citizens are suffering and the presidency is embroiled in turmoil. And now President Nicolas Maduro is blaming U.S. President Donald Trump for any violence in his country after the United States imposed sanctions on Venezuela's PDVSA, the state-run oil company. The sanctions freeze any assets the company has in the United States. U.S. firms and citizens are also barred from doing business with it. Maduro also lashed out at Trump during a broadcast address Monday night, accusing him of trying to change the Venezuelan regime by pressuring him to cede power to the U.S.-backed opposition in the oil-rich nation. Maduro said last week he is ending diplomatic relations with the United States in response to Trump's announcement that the U.S. was officially recognizing National Assembly President Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim leader. Guaido is already laying out a blueprint for a transition from Maduro. The sanctions imposed on Venezuela's state-owned oil company is an increased effort to pressure Nicolas Maduro to relinquish power to Juan Guaido, now recognized by the U.S. and a number of other nations as the country's legitimate president. VOA's Cindy Sain has more from the State Department.
Amid the political crisis in Venezuela, with tens of thousands calling on Nicolas Maduro to step down, the U.S. increased the pressure on him Monday by hitting his government's lifeline, its state-owned oil company.
We're going to announce sanctions against Petroleos de Venezuela, Sociedad Anima, or PDVSA, as it's known by its Spanish acronym, the state-owned oil monopoly. We have continued to expose the corruption of Maduro and his cronies, and today's action ensures they can no longer loot the assets of the Venezuelan people.
Bolton called on the Venezuelan military and security forces to accept the peaceful, democratic, and constitutional transfer of power to interim President Guaido. Appearing to feel the international pressure, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza made an offer to the U.S. earlier Monday.
Remember that Commander Hugo Chavez said, and President Maduro confirmed thousands of times, if it's necessary to meet with President Trump, or if it's necessary to meet with the devil to have relations of peace and respect between our countries, we would do that. But I'm not saying that Trump is the devil.
Analysts say the oil sanctions may deliver a devastating blow to Maduro.
This is the nuclear option. I mean, this is sort of the most powerful weapon the U.S. has, short of military force, at its disposal.
The U.S. has been reluctant to impose oil sanctions because the two countries have been interdependent on Venezuela's crude oil for decades. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Still ahead on Africa 54, a Cameroonian designer makes her mark on the fashion industry. But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines.
In Somalia, the detonation of explosives packed into a car has killed at least 2 people and injured 5 near the Ministry of Petroleum in Mogadishu. In Cameroon, bystanders say police fired tear gas and gunshots into a crowd following the arrest of opposition leader Maurice Kamto in Douala on Monday evening. A court in Nairobi is deciding whether to prosecute 5 suspects in the April 2015 Al-Shabaab attack on Garissa University that left nearly 150 people dead. In Zimbabwe, opposition leader Nelson Chamisa blames President Emerson Mnangagwa for the, quote, anarchy, unquote, that has killed at least 12 people and wounded hundreds following a state crackdown on protests.
It's time for our health report, and joining us is Africa 54 health correspondent Lenore Mudu with a look at obesity, hunger and climate change. Lenore?
That's right, Esther. A new report in the medical journal The Lancet says the world needs to find a solution quickly to fight 3 interrelated pandemics: obesity, starvation and climate change. The Lancet Commission, a group of 43 experts from 14 countries with a broad range of expertise, say the way in which food is currently produced, distributed and consumed not only fuels the hunger and obesity pandemics, it also generates 25 to 30% of planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. To defeat the intertwined pandemics of obesity, hunger and climate change, governments must curb the political influence of major corporations, according to the experts. The report's other recommendations include reducing government subsidies for beef, dairy, sugar, corn, rice, and wheat, and redirecting that money to sustainable farming for healthier foods. Now, educators in a school in Ghana are encouraging students to improve their health through a unique physical education program.
Get in shape, learn, and have fun. That's what students are doing here at the Fountain of Youth International Primary School in Accra. It is their physical education class. Jean Otumfo teaches the class. He is the fitness manager with Oshikani Fitness Agency, a company helping people in Ghana to get and stay in shape, particularly children.
What we do is we offer fitness programs to institutions, but our main focus is the kids, that's the schools. We are currently in 15 schools, and we teach physical education, we teach music and movements, basically everything to get a child moving. We want to stop a lot of physical inactivity that is growing in our community in Ghana.
15 out of 16 classes in the school are enrolled in PE, including some students who are as young as 2 years old. Educators say physical education is a key component of the school's curriculum. Maxwell Efa is the assistant head of the primary school.
You need to be well, you need to be fit in order to have your work going. So as a student, you need that as well for your total well-being.
For Otumfo, focusing on fitness for children is a long-term investment.
I'm looking at the non-communicable diseases, okay? That if we want to really play a role in changing things, in preventing and controlling stuff, then we have to start from the grassroots, which is the children. And we thank God that we have schools which already have systems for us to use these systems and get whatever we want.
The World Health Organization estimates that by the year 2020, 7 out of every 10 deaths in developing countries will be due to non-communicable diseases. And according to the U.S. National Institute of Health, Physical inactivity is one of the 4 most common modifiable risk factors for non-communicable diseases. As the students here make some positive steps toward preventing some sicknesses through exercise, it is also an opportunity to review what they have learned in class.
We have also integrated our lessons into the physical education. So we come out, we do shapes, we come out, we do fruits, vegetables, etc. So the children are playing and learning at the same time.
I like exercise. I like dance. I like sports. And I like development. I like to play and exercise.
Otunfo hopes to expand the program further in the country and share his awareness message that one can never be too young to develop a good exercise regimen.
And Osikani's fitness program also encourages parents to review at home some of the moves learned by their children and make it a fun exercise activity for the entire family. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lino. Be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. And welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. For artists, anything can be a canvas, but a public toilet in a Lagos slum? Gani Taiwo is the man with the brush, the paintbrush. He says colorful murals are a way of improving the slum's look and raising the spirits of people living there. The biofuel toilet uses microorganisms to decompose the waste before it's flushed. As well as painting it, Gani volunteers with the organization that built it, the Nigeria Slum and Informal Settlement Federation. Lagos State has tried to demolish some of the waterfront settlements in a bid to transform the city. But current estimates say that by 2050, 40% of the world's extreme poor will live in just 2 countries, Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria. Next up, South African archaeologists have rediscovered an ancient lost city known as Kweneng using laser technology. The researchers who are with the University of Witwatersrand have been studying the site on the Suika-Bosrand National Park for decades. But it was not until cutting-edge laser technology known as light detection and ranging became available in recent years that they were able to study the ruins in detail from above and discovered that what they thought was only a scattering of ancient stone huts turned out to be a veritable city. Studies now reveal that Kweneng, which is spanned about 20 square kilometers, was at its prime between the 15th and 19th century. And that's what's trending today. Now, Cameroonian-born Kibonen Nifi entered the world of fashion designing in 2009. She was inspired by traditional Cameroonian fabric and New York's vibrant fashion scene. Her clothing line, Kibonen New York, has been worn by models from various ethnic backgrounds during fashion shows in New York City and Africa. In 2013, Africa Fashion International named her Emerging Designer of the Year. Now, Kibonen joins me here in the studio to tell us more about her work. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much, Esther, for having me.
I'm very proud to have you with us today. So many of African designers and all the names that are known in terms of cloth and designing, there's so many of them in New York. So how do you actually even get into the market?
Into the market. Thank you so much for that question. Actually, when I was in New York and I started doing fashion, I did not know much about fashion at the time, so I decided to go back to school to study fashion. So I have a degree in fashion, but while I was in school, I learned a lot about fashion. I even had the opportunity to do New York Fashion Week while I was in school. I interned at Donna Karan, and I was a Louis Vuitton intern too, so from there, that's how I was able to really penetrate the New York fashion scene.
Now, leave alone the names that we know from America and others that are all over in this country. Right. What about an African trying to get a name in America as a fashion designer?
As a fashion, it's very, very possible because that's why I say you need to understand where you need to be able to do what you have to do, because the fashion industry is a very I will not say segregated, but it's a very tight. And for you to get in, you need to know how to do it. And for me, it was better for me going into school, and from school, I got the internship, and then I got to the shows, and that's how I integrated into the fashion industry.
I'm sure there are other African designers like you,
right.
Even in New York. How do you compete, or how do you even compare notes?
I know. Well, for the other fashion, we do a lot of events together. There is also the Africa Fashion Week in New York, which is great. There is another African fashion show in New York Fashion Week, which is great. And as Africans, we figured out a way of bringing ourselves together. You know, a lot of designers come together. They do pop-up shops together. They do events together, ethical fashion events, and also the Fashion Institute of Technology really helps to promote and support African designers.
Now, knowing what you know, what do you need to do to make your brand name known?
First of all, you need to really be confident in what you have, and then you need to have a lot of media exposure. And your products have to be good. For me, one thing that worked well for me is that a couple of celebrities wore my products, and that was huge publicity. And another thing that worked to my advantage was when I was featured in Humans of New York blog. From that blog, I had over 100,000 followers, you know, in and out of America. So those were the things that really worked for me, besides the fact that I had a good product, a good and original product.
And soon we'll hear one of those people we see from Hollywood wearing some of your outfits.
Lupita Nyong'o already wore some.
Oh, she did?
Yeah,
wow,
she did.
That's great. So tell me, how are you giving back then to the community that first inspired you? Those village women that were wearing those beautiful fabrics.
I know.
African
those women,
prints.
they've always been in my heart, because when I started fashion, they were always there for me. So the embroidery that is done on my garment is really traditional to my hometown in Cameroon. So I had the deep urge to open up a factory there. So I opened up a factory in Cameroon, and I hired over between 50 to 70 people. Some were part-time, some were full-time. And I had all these women working with me. Unfortunately, with the situation in Bamenda right now, I had to shut it down. And I'm still trying to, I'm waiting to see what's going to be the next phase there. But at the meantime, I'm relocating my productions to Nigeria.
And Kibone, New York fashion is for both men, women, all kinds of people.
Definitely, yes.
Well, we wish you well. We wish you luck.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully we get to hear your name more and more.
I know. Kibone.
Thank you, Kibone, for coming on Africa 54. Kibone Nfi is an African fashion designer. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa, between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Thank you.